Welcome back, everybody, to session 5B now of There's Ups and Downs, a parental wellness series, where we are going to finish the top 10 list that we started in our last video about the positive behavior support strategies that work best for kids with Down syndrome. So let's start with reviewing the ones that we went over last time. I'm also going to take you through a mindfulness practice here as well. So the first few, those first 7 are all preventative strategies for problem behavior. And then today we're going to get into teaching and consequence strategies. But to set us up for success, let's go through a mindfulness practice. And this one, this little girl on the side here is wearing a dress with hearts all over it. And it makes me think of the mindfulness meditation that parents request the most when I ask them to choose one out of the ones that we have done so far. And parents really seem to like the different parents like different ones, but one of the more popular ones is definitely the loving kindness meditation. And so that's the one that we're going to do together today. So we're going to start with the sitting mindfulness practice that we learned the very first mindfulness session. And then I'll take you through the loving kindness practice. So as we begin our sitting mindfulness meditation, just get comfortable in your usual way. You can close your eyes or gaze downwards with a soft focus. Start off with just a couple of deep breaths. Get nice and relaxed. And then let your breathing return to normal. And bring your focus and your awareness to your breath. Try to count each exhale until you arrive at 10, and then begin again at 1. And so staying in this present moment, try now moving your focus from your breath to your heart. What you want to do is direct feelings of love and kindness and friendliness towards yourself. It may be helpful to visualize sunlight streaming into your body as you do this. And so as you direct these warm feelings towards yourself, in your own inner voice, repeat the following. May I be safe and free from inner and outer harm. May I be healthy and strong. May I be happy and peaceful. May I have ease of being. And now draw to mind someone you hold dear, someone who you are fondly affectionate towards, someone you hold in high regard. This is likely a family member or a friend, but it could be a spiritual being or a pet. Direct the feelings of loving kindness, maybe in the form of sunlight, towards this person. It may be helpful to picture them sitting in front of you. And repeat the following in your own inner voice. May you be safe and free from inner and outer harm. May you be healthy and strong. May you be happy and peaceful. May you have ease of being. And next, think of someone with whom you do not have an easy relationship. Maybe there's a bit of discomfort or discord of some kind. Someone who you are having a bit of difficulty with in your interactions, not too much difficulty, not anything too negative, but somebody who you're having a little bit of trouble with currently. This is probably a family member or a coworker, might be a friend. So now try to hold this person in your mind while you repeat the following in your own inner voice. May you be safe and free from inner and outer harm. May you be healthy and strong. May you be happy and peaceful. May you have ease of being. And finally, bring to mind someone for whom you have neutral feelings. So someone you likely don't know very well. This could be a person who works at your favorite restaurant or a neighbor, maybe a person who you see regularly at your child's school, but you don't know well. Direct feelings of loving kindness, maybe again in this form of a sunbeam, towards this person while you repeat the following. May you be safe and free from inner and outer harm. May you be healthy and strong. May you be happy and peaceful. May you have ease of being. And so as we come to the end of this practice, try to keep these feelings of loving kindness with you as you now think about your child's behavior and also move through the rest of your day. You can gently open your eyes and have a little stretch, and let's get right into it. So we are going to start with talking about teaching strategies. And this is basically to address the problem behavior itself that your child is having. So instead of engaging in problem behavior, can we teach them adaptive behaviors instead? And yes, we definitely can. So one way to do this is to teach them to be more independent at daily life skills. That one's a huge topic and one to talk to your friendly neighborhood OT about, but not one that we're going to cover today. The one that we are going to cover today is called functional communication training. So this is one teaching strategy, but it can definitely take you a really long way. And it is can be a little bit of a complicated one, especially if your child is still at quite an early level of language development. But you can always talk to your child's speech language pathologist about this one to get more ideas and more guidance around it. So FCT, or functional communication training, is essentially teaching the child to use communication to convey messages instead of engaging in problem behavior. So instead of chucking puzzle pieces across the room saying, I don't want to do this, or something different, please, something like that. So the child basically has learned often that a problem behavior serves a purpose. Okay, so it gets her or him out of doing something, it gets them attention, or it gets them a preferred object or activity. And so what we're trying to do here is teach the child a way to ask for each of these things appropriately. And that can be verbal language, but it can also be other things as well if your little kidlet is not at that stage yet. So for the function of the behavior that we're talking about occurring in a given situation, function again meaning the purpose behind the behavior, why it's occurring, we need to teach the child an equivalent communicative message. So if they're having a tantrum to get out of doing reading, you need to teach them an I don't want it message. If they're hitting mom to get attention, you need to teach them a look at me message. And if they're whining and crying in order to get an iPad, it's an I want it message. So you see that this is equivalent to escape, attention, and tangible. There's also automatic reinforcement. We're not going to talk about those ones so much because they happen less often and are can be quite a lot less bothersome to parents and problematic. And they're also a little harder to get at why and what the actual message is. It's usually something like, I need to calm down, or I need to wake up, those kinds of things. So I think the rationale here is probably fairly obvious. We want to teach a functional communication phrase so that it renders the problem behavior ineffective or inefficient. And it's ineffective only if the parent stops responding to the problem behavior to serve the same purpose, right? So now they only respond to if a child is grunting and yelling to try and get goldfish crackers. They now don't respond to that anymore. They don't get them the goldfish crackers if they grunt and yell. Now they're only going to get the goldfish crackers for the child if they say, I want fishy crackers, please, right? Or some other message that might be fewer words that you've taught them to use. So essentially, the problem behavior no longer works as well or as quickly as this replacement behavior, which is the communicative message. So because kids with Down syndrome have a lot of difficulty with expressive language, especially at early stages of development, it is a skill that needs to be directly and repetitively taught. And so that's maybe where you want some guidance from your child's SLP around this. The great thing about functional communication training is that because you are teaching your child a skill that they will now have and they can use presumably for the rest of their life in more and more complex ways, it's a permanent non-situation specific strategy. And so that makes it really powerful. So once they have learned how to appropriately express those messages, they can do those, they can do that in many different environments with many different people. And they will learn that pretty quickly, actually. So it's a really great thing because it's portable. It doesn't require you to do anything like all the preventative strategies we were talking about. Once they've got the hang of this, they see that, oh, if I use words, I get things that I want. And then that is enough to keep it going and to keep them making sure that they generalize the skill to other environments. So in our little example of Elyse that we talked about last time, where she basically was, let's just go through it again. Her big behaviors were that she was whining and flopping and dropping and giggling and not putting her pajamas on and staying on the floor. Okay, the setting events there were that maybe she didn't eat enough during the day, dad wasn't home. So those are things that make it more likely for the problem behavior to occur. The antecedent was that mom makes a demand, it's time to put on your PJs, and then she does all these behaviors. The consequence is that she didn't go to bed, she stayed on the floor, and mom left her alone. So she escaped the demand to go to bed or to put PJs on. So here's what this is kind of the, what we're really after. I mean, this is the, whoa, wouldn't this be great scenario. Okay, so here's what we actually want her behavior to be like. Mom makes a demand, hey, Elyse, time to put on your PJs. She puts on her PJs and goes to bed. I mean, who doesn't want that? That's a good idea. And the consequence here is maybe some praise, right? Again, you're hearing my favorite word. And or a story from mom, and she also gets a good night's sleep, which is fantastic. However, it may take a while to get there. Maybe Elyse needs more help putting on her PJs independently, right? Maybe she needs to learn that skill still. Maybe it's just going to take a little while to get to that stage. Doesn't mean you won't get there, but an intermediary thing that's going to make it a little easier for mom and less likely that Elyse is going to engage in problem behavior is if we give her an alternative replacement behavior in the form of a functional communicative message. 5 more minutes, please, mom. She gets 5 more minutes. She gets a little bit of escape, but then she has to go to bed. Again, she's going to have a bit more ownership. I asked for 5 minutes. The timer's off. I guess I have to go to bed now. It's not going to work every single time, again, just like I've been saying with all these strategies, but it will help. So here are some guidelines. And this, again, is a little bit of a complicated one because there's lots of little nuanced things that you need to figure out with the kids. But basically you need to make sure you're clear about the function of the behavior and an appropriate replacement message for your particular kid. So, things like escape messages might be things like help please, or I need a break. Or like we just taught Elyse, 5 more minutes, please. Tangible ones would be things like, I want this, or may I have this, please? And attention would be like, look, mom, or come here, please, that kind of thing. So some more guidelines. You want to identify circumstances that often result in the child's use of problem behavior, and you're going to teach in those scenarios. You're going to anticipate the occurrence and then prompt the child to produce this message in the beginning. Even if it means they're getting a lot of fishy crackers, you must honor the child's request or message immediately and every time. And this is so that they can learn. This is how they're going to learn best, is if you reward it immediately and every time. So, and then trying to create multiple opportunities for the child to practice the new behavior during the day. So you can engineer opportunities to practice it as well. Again, ask the SLP. So there are some very common mistakes that can happen. This is a school-specific one. So it's recess, and Mrs. Chatterson, Jane, and a peer are playing. Jane begins to fuss and whine and look at a favorite peer. She then kicks the peer. Mrs. Chatterson intervenes at that point after she's kicked and says, Jane, use your words. Jane says, come play. Her peer approaches Jane and they begin to play. The teacher says, great using your words, Jane. So Jane's functional communication phrase here is come play, which is a great one. That's a good one for getting attention of a peer. The error here, though, is that Mrs. Chatterson intervened too late. She intervened after Jane had already engaged in major problem behavior, which was kicking, right? And that's definitely not going to make that peer want to play with her anymore. So how could Jane's teacher do this better next time? Well, she could intervene a little earlier on. So you kind of want to get at it as early as you possibly can. If you know that this is a problematic situation, you want to prompt the language as early as you possibly can. So let's now get into some consequence strategies. So these are things that we're going to do first following good behavior. And then I know you've all been waiting for it. What do I do after my kid actually engages in problematic behavior? So I will get to that today, I promise. Okay, so the first one is positive reinforcement. So positive reinforcement is given after adaptive, desirable behavior. And it's a consequence that's given immediately after that behavior. And this strengthens the likelihood that that behavior will occur again in the future. So you basically want to reward things that you want to see more of, okay? There are 2 ways to do this, and we're going to go through both of them. I've put our focus today, but actually we'll go through both of them. It's just that praise is the one that is most problematic usually for parents. And so I may focus a little more heavily on that one. But there are 2 ways to do it. You can give praise after a child has done something adaptive and desirable, or you can give them a tangible reward, which we already talked about a little bit when we talked about positive contingencies and visual supports in the last video. So let's talk about praise. It's my favorite thing to talk about because it's so important. So one way to increase the amount, and probably the best way to increase the amount of appropriate adaptive behavior that your child engages in over time, is to verbally or non-verbally praise that behavior. So praise being a positive action of some kind that's given to a child immediately after they engage in good behavior. And I do mean immediately, because actually behavioral research has shown that even if you delay the reward or the praise by like 10 or 20 seconds, it's not as likely to make the behavior occur again in the future. So it's a less powerful reinforcer. So verbal praise is a behavior specific, and we do want to try to be specific whenever possible. So, not just great work, but I really like the way you zipped your coat up all the way to the top, right? Those kinds of things. So a really positive comment, or I loved your kind words today, or you use such a nice, quiet voice. Thank you. So you want to tell the child exactly what it is that they're doing right and exactly what it is that you want to see more of. Nonverbal praise can be pretty much any physical interaction that your child enjoys. So, smiling and clapping and high-fiving and fist bumping and cheering are all examples of this. I had a couple of parents actually who got really into using, they got a little bit tired from all the cheering with their kids, but they saw that it worked really well. So dad actually found an applause app that it basically just made like a really fun applause noise whenever and he would play that whenever his kid. I mean, I think it's best if it comes from the parent, but I thought that was a very clever, creative solution. So why do we want to give so much praise? This can be a really tough one for parents to wrap their heads around. And part of it may be that this is not the way we function as human beings, right? We don't go around praising people all the time for stuff and complimenting people on doing little things. It's likely not the way all of us were raised, right? And it may not be the way that you raised your other kids who don't have Down syndrome. And so it can be hard for parents to do this one, but there are definite reasons to do more of it, to do it and to do more of it. So your child needs to know what behaviors he or she should be doing, not just what not to be doing. So lots of times parents default to, and teachers and educational assistants and therapists, like we all do this sometimes, we default to corrections, right? So, saying things like, oops, or no, not quite, or let's do it this way, or no, or stop it, or don't do that, those kinds of things, rather than rewarding the good stuff, right? But they need to know what they should be doing. More praise leads to more positive parent-child interactions, resulting in a healthier relationship. And remember, I talked about before, if your relationship is healthy, if your child views you as a fun mom or a really warm, loving dad, they will just inherently be more likely to behave well and to comply with more of your instructions. That's just the way it is. More positive behavior has to equal less problem behavior. This is one of the great things about behavior acting lawfully, right? Behavior follows laws. And so you can't possibly be engaging in bad behavior and good behavior at the same time. It's not possible to do that. You can engage in neutral behavior, but you can't do both good and bad at the same time. So if you increase positive behavior by way of praise, then this one has to go down. The bad, not desirable behavior, the problem behavior has got to go down without you even addressing it. So it's a very powerful strategy because of that. Another thing to point out is that parents will often say, well, the problem behavior is just everywhere. Like it's just, I can't even find a time when I can praise my kid. And that may be part of the issue here. You may have to spend some time noticing when your child is engaging in halfway decent behavior, right? And you start praising even neutral behavior. But it is very unlikely that your child is engaging in problem behavior 100% of the time. That is almost certainly not the case. I've seen it go pretty high in certain routines for some kids if the routine is very problematic, like 80 or 90% of the time. But honestly, most of the time for most kids with Down syndrome, it's probably maybe half. A lot of the time, it just feels like a lot because the problem behavior is more salient to you. So really start paying attention to, and this may be where you need to start as a parent, start paying attention to when is my kid not engaging in problem behavior and focusing in on that and then starting to praise it. The last little piece of the rationale here is that social rewards are often the most powerful type of reinforcement for kids with Down syndrome who are really people motivated a lot of the time. I don't want to overgeneralize. It's not the case for every single child with Down syndrome, but I don't know a whole lot of them in my now 17 years of working with them who aren't at least a little bit people motivated. And so this idea of getting rewards from parents and from teachers and therapists is really appealing to kids with Down syndrome, and they'll work pretty hard to get it for sure. So some guidelines here. I've already talked about the one where we have to use specific language. You don't need to do that every time. It's fine to say great work or good job sometimes, but you definitely want to sometimes be using the full phrase, like great putting your coat on. They need to know exactly what it is they did right so they can do it again in the future. Being sincere, right? So making sure that you mean what you say. Using an enthusiastic or upbeat tone of voice or whatever tone or volume your child prefers. Smiling. So of course, augmenting verbal with physical praise. Using varied wording to avoid satiation or boredom. So try not to say the same thing every time. You've heard me say this already a few times as well. It's good to have variety so they don't get bored of the same thing. They'll stop responding as well if you use the same tactic every time or the same kind of praise every time. And then for those of you who like math and numbers and you want, some percentages or some ratios, I have a ratio for you. So try to aim for a 5-to-1 ratio of praise to correction or criticism. So for every one time that you correct your child or criticize them about something, there should be 5 instances of praise. And I can promise you that you're likely not doing that. But the point is to just do more praise. But it's a hard one to get to that ratio for sure for most parents. And so this brings us to the common pitfalls and this big giant ready orange one I have here, which is that most parents do not give enough praise. And lots of parents will say, I praise my kid a lot. Like I definitely tell him a lot. Even those parents should do it more. I mean, I'm telling you this as a clinician who has worked directly with kids and their parents for, as I've said, over 17 years now. And I would say in very rare instances are parents actually giving the amount of praise and the type of praise that is actually required to build, more skills and more adaptive behavior. You can always probably up this for sure. So giving praise that is not specific is another pitfall. So don't overuse things like good job. Don't be lame. Don't give praise that's like, oh, good job. Don't give backhanded compliments. So nice work putting your shoes on. Maybe next time you'll put them on the right feet. I mean, we all probably have lots of us have a tendency to be sarcastic. I know I do, but praise is not the opportunity to be sarcastic. And wrong timing. So giving praise after your child has begun engaging in problem behavior. And I bet you there's a bunch of you right now who are like, I wouldn't do that. Well, you actually might be doing this. So much like in photography, like this person had the right timing when they took this picture because it's really funny. Consequences are all about timing too. And so the classic example that I always refer to with this one is when I followed some families around grocery stores and was videotaping them for my research project. There were moms who the child would actually be doing okay. They'd be kind of holding onto the cart and walking nicely and maybe helping put a few things in the cart. And mom would just kind of be, going along, doing her thing. But then she would basically, as soon as the child started to engage in some problem behavior, that's when she would be like, it's okay, honey, you're doing a really good job. You're doing a great job. Let's just keep going. We just have a little bit more to do. Let's just keep going. And that is exactly the wrong time to engage in that sort of thing. So you definitely don't want to have it at that particular time, for sure. You want to make sure that that praise is coming before problem behavior has occurred. You want to do it after good adaptive behavior. So in those times when the kid was actually pushing the cart and walking nicely and putting things in the cart, that was the time to deliver the praise. Otherwise, what she's done is she's reinforced problem behavior, unfortunately. And this is totally normal. It's why I'm talking about it. All parents do this. In fact, all of us probably do this. I'm sure I make this mistake all the time as a therapist. It's kind of our natural way to try and get the kid to stay on track a little bit, right? But you have to make sure that it's done before they engage in problem behavior. So let's move on now to the second type of positive reinforcement, which is the use of a reinforcement menu. Okay, so like you're going to a restaurant and you get to choose between all these really fun foods. This is the same kind of thing. So when your kid engages in positive or desired behavior, they can choose from a reinforcement menu of highly preferred items or activities in order to positively reinforce or make sure the the positive behavior will happen again in the future. So examples of desired behavior, in case your kid isn't engaging any right now and you need some ideas of things you might want to reinforce, getting their shoes on, sitting at the lunch table, completing activities like work activities, using the toilet independently. What is really great about this one is it's another kind of twofer situation. So it incorporates both the strategies of reward for positive behavior and choice, which is really good. So we want to use this because even though I was saying that the verbal and physical praise are really potent strategies, sometimes kids need a bit more variety, and sometimes they need just a little bit more than just, a pat on the back for doing things that are especially tough. So you might want to keep these things for times when you know your child is really having a hard time. So the element of choice given by the reinforcement menu makes the strategy even more powerful. The other question I get asked a lot here from parents and teachers and all other people on teams is, why does the child need all this reinforcement? Shouldn't he just want to complete the task for the satisfaction of completing the task? And in fact, a lot of us do that, right? A lot of us will complete tasks because it feels good to complete them. But, and I'm not going to talk about this one here too much, but you really need to use this with kids with Down syndrome. And just in case, I'm not going to go through this because I don't think it's problematic for everybody, but a lot of people confuse bribery with the appropriate use of rewards. And they are very different things, actually. So just in case that's something you're a little confused about, I think only a few people generally are. Give this little slide a read when you get the slides. So, but something that can't be overemphasized here is that for people with Down syndrome, we need to use praise and or tangible rewards. It's especially important during difficult tasks, and we know that lots of tasks are difficult, and definitely important during skills that are new in the process of being learned. Respectful, planful, competent use of positive reinforcement strengthens good behavior over time. It allows behavior to become more sophisticated over time, and it maintains behavior that's already established. So it is not an option, for sure. So here are just a couple of examples of, this is from the Working For app, but really you could use this you could do this anyway. You could just use plain old board maker symbols or drawings for this. But this is an example of a reinforcement menu. Here are some things you want to do. Again, it's another thing, not total rocket science, but make sure that you have in mind and maybe have a giant list actually of things that are really reinforcing for your particular child. And then what you want to do here too is that it's that idea of variety again. So don't show your kid the whole list every time. Show them just a few things, and then next week vary it up again a little bit. Making sure that they're all currently available. So we're not going to put water slides on there in the middle of the winter. What you want to do is when your child engages in the really tough thing or they finish the really difficult routine, immediately present them with the reinforcement menu and say, that was great, whatever it was they did, you get to choose something now, right? So you want to pair that tangible or activity reward with some verbal praise. Again, so that they know what they did right. And you want to try to give the praise first and then give the reward. So try not, the other thing here to keep in mind is you want to keep reinforcers, especially reinforcing. So try not to let them have free access to these things all the time, because that will lessen their power, basically. So common pitfalls, this is what I was saying about the water slides, like don't be putting that on there in the middle of the winter, or if you can't go right away, not giving it immediately after, and putting too many things on there is not a good idea. So our very last strategy, again, the one you've all been waiting for, here it is. What do I do when my kid engages in problem behavior? So the strategy we're going to use here is called actively ignore and positively redirect. And we're not going to do it the way this monkey is doing it, even though you may be tempted sometimes. There are 3 parts to this definition. So we're going to talk about each of them in turn. So minor problem behavior, active ignoring, and positively redirecting. So minor problem behavior is behavior that is low in frequency and or intensity. So think of things like just non-compliance, like saying no or turning away or just not responding to instructions, whining, a little bit of crying, leaving their assigned area, maybe wandering out of the room, but it's not this little dude on the right, who's having a full-blown temper tantrum, property destruction, injuring themselves or others, or running away, like where you can't find them for a while. This strategy will not work for major problem behavior. So you can't use it if their child is engaging in major problem behavior. And there are several reasons for that. One being, at that point, they're not actually able to, they're either doing something that's really unsafe. So you're going to need to pay attention to the behavior because it's very unsafe, or there's no chance to ignore it, is what I mean by that. Or they're so heightened in their arousal that they won't be able to process anything you do with them. And actually, when your child is engaging in major problem behavior, your arousal level is off, also probably very likely very much heightened. So it's not a good scenario to use this strategy there. So what we want to think about here, though, is often you can nip it in the bud. So major problem behavior often starts out as fairly minor. There are often precursors or warning signs, or if you want to be really dramatic about it, the signal of impending doom, right? So the classic example I always give is, you know, I'm ending a speech therapy session and we've had a great time and I just want to talk to mom for a couple minutes. And so mom and I are talking, and the little person who's, you know, like at our waist level is like, mom, Susan, mom, mom. And then they start saying mom because they really want mom's attention. They start yelling it, mom. And then if mom still doesn't respond, whack, right? So that's kind of an example of, it started out as pretty minor. Then actually it started out as appropriate behavior. They were asking nicely for our attention. Then they got maybe a bit whiny, then they got a bit too loud and they started yelling, and then they hit, which is now sort of starting to go into the realm of major problem behavior. But usually what would happen in that scenario is, when does mom start paying attention? She pays attention as soon as she gets hit, right? She doesn't pay attention when the child is appropriately asking. She now pays attention when the child has hit, which means she has inadvertently reinforced problem behavior by giving attention. So, you know, it's not a good plan. So the other couple of things to think about here are the other couple parts of the definition are to actively ignore. So you're not going to ignore the problem behavior's occurrence, but you're not going to show a reaction to it, to your child, while you address it. And then positively redirect. There are 2 routes you can do this. One is to redirect the child back to the activity or task they should be doing. The other one is to redirect them to use the functional communication phrase that we talked about earlier. So there's rationale behind why we want to use this strategy to engage, to deal with minor problem behavior. We want to respond to the low intensity behaviors before they escalate. And that's what I was saying about nipping the problem in the bud. We need to make it so that that problem behavior no longer works for the child to obtain the desired outcome. And we do that by not attending to, in other words, reinforcing, because for most kids with Down syndrome, problem behavior has an attention component most of the time. So instead, the child must re-engage in appropriate behavior, like back to the activity or using a functional communication phrase in order to be rewarded, in order to get the attention or to get the escape that they're looking for. So this is the big point, is that active ignoring is really useful for kids with Down syndrome whose behavior is often very much attention motivated. So some guidelines here. Active ignoring, you're going to avoid eye contact with your child. You're going to use a neutral facial expression, so not the dude on the left, go for more the dude on the right. I'll give you another example in a minute. And don't talk to the child about the problem behavior, which, by the way, you're probably going to have a hard time refraining from doing. So most of us like to reason with the kid, right? Because this might work with your typically developing kids. Well, you shouldn't have done that because it makes mommy really upset and it hurts me and it does this and it does that. But that's just reinforcing to a kid with Down syndrome. That is just all attention, basically. So you don't want to talk to them about it. And that also includes not saying things like, stop it, don't do that. I don't like it when you do that. Those things are definitely going to reinforce the problem behavior for most kids with Down syndrome. So don't talk at all, just zip it. So here you go. These little girls have engaged in some fairly problematic behavior, probably to get mom's attention. And you can see in the top left corner, mom has got a really good facial expression that's probably quite entertaining for this little girl in the pink in the front, right? So her face is moving a lot. It's red. She's pulling her hair out. Like if the little girl wasn't getting any attention before this, and now her mom has this really active, fun looking face, that's going to be kind of exciting for her. So that's what you want to avoid. And for some of you, that will be harder than for others of you, for sure. This can take a while to get the hang of, definitely. So this is what I'm going to ask you to go for. I like to call this stone face. I want you to try to emulate the Easter Island guy when you are dealing with your child's problem behavior. Like what I really like about him is his flat lips. So there's absolutely no frown or smile or anything like that. And there's also, he has no eyeballs. So, which to me just shows that there's no eye contact going on. Because remember, you don't want to make eye contact either. And you want your face to just be flat as much as possible. This also includes, I'm just going to add here, laughing at problem behavior. And I am very guilty of this because sometimes kids with Down syndrome, kids with Down syndrome do really funny things, but they're still problematic if they're getting them out of doing work, right? And so trying not to kind of giggle when kids engage in problem behavior, even if it's cute or silly or adorable, is also a good idea, even though that's also very hard to do. Go for stone face. Okay, and then our last little bit here is to positively redirect the child either back to the activity or to their use of language. So redirecting back to the activity, visually, gesturally, or physically, redirecting them back to what they should be doing, and pair it with a verbal message. You want to make sure here that if you are going to talk, that it's in a calm voice. If you can't manage a calm voice and you're really annoyed or angry or laughing, then don't talk at all. Just do the physical guidance back to the activity, because you definitely want to use as much of a neutral voice as you can. So if a child who was eating their dinner got up and ran away and started playing with their cars, I might go get them, kind of help them stand up, take a firm grip on their shoulder and guide them back to the table and say, right now we're eating dinner. And that's it, right? You don't say, right now we're eating dinner. You're not done your dinner. You're gonna be hungry later. That's exactly what you don't want to do. So just right now we're eating dinner. Help them sit down. And then as soon as they re-engage in the task, you give them, guess what? Praise. Okay, so the other thing you can do here is redirect the child to use language to say, if they walk away from the table, say, hey, you can say, I need a break, please, or I'm done, that kind of thing, so that they're not just getting up and running away. So a couple common pitfalls, and then we're done for this particular little video. So using this strategy after the minor problem behavior has morphed into the major problem behavior, because it won't work at that stage, and then overusing it. So actually, this is a really weak strategy. So what the problem with it is that any attention that you give, even if it's just a calm, confident, right now we're doing this, or taking the child's shoulder, any of that is going to be somewhat reinforcing to the behavior. So if you find that you're doing this a lot, then that means you need to revisit preventative strategies, because your child is still engaging in too much problem behavior in that routine. So don't overuse it, for sure. So a couple of take-home messages for today, and then we'll finish off. The big one here, that if you take anything away from today, give your child more praise, both specific verbal praise and physical praise. They will eat it up. It will be good for them. It will be good for you. It'll be great for your relationship. It will reduce your stress, because focusing on positive things is always good for lowering stress levels. And so this is really key for you to be able to see more of what your child doing what you want them to be doing. And then the teaching and consequence strategies you can try here. Functional communication training, which is teaching a phrase to basically replace the problem behavior. Positive reinforcement in the form of praise, or these tangible rewards. We talked about the reinforcement menus. And then for minor problem behavior, you want to try the actively ignore and positively redirect strategy. And that is about it for today. So we are done now with the positive behavior support strategies. Please email me if you have any questions or you want to chat about it some more. And I will, next time for our last video, we will be talking about reframing and other strategies for dealing with unhelpful thinking patterns, which lots of parents tend to engage in. So I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.